So as the title slide shows, the topic of this presentation is global Englishes and its connection to attitudes about accents. And the reason for my interest in global Englishes is first, as a research assistant, I've done work on a book this semester that's a collection of essays about global Englishes. And the second reason is my history as an adult English language instructor. And I've heard stories and experienced students who suffered abuse and subjected themselves to abuse for how they sound, for non-native accents. And the first question to answer is, what is global Englishes? Well, if we look at the illustration on this slide, we see that the idea behind the Global Englishes framework is to bring together four different paradigms, which are World Englishes, English as a lingua franca, English as an international language, and translanguaging. And the purpose is to build this justice-oriented perspective, in my view, to put an emphasis on how English actually functions in the world. I think we know that most speakers of English in the world are not native speakers, but are users of English as an additional language. So the emphasis is on how English actually functions versus the pressure to achieve some native speaker standard, which is an ideological construct. So the reason for doing the study comes from some previous research, and some of the earlier studies that I drew on show that English language students rank pronunciation more favorably if they believe that speaker to be a native English speaker. And this combines with some unrealistic learning goals that students often have. So one study in Oman, among more than 300 university-level English learners, found that 70% of them wanted a native speaker accent, even though they had not yet to exceed intermediate capacity in English. Other research, which is important, shows that second language speech is mutually intelligible. So a Japanese English speaker can understand a Southeast Asian English speaker and vice versa. And this bias against non-native accents is really a matter of choice. So the question, the overall guiding question comes up, which is rendered on this slide, which is, can awareness of this kind of research that Global Englishes makes possible affect learners' opinions about accents, about non-native accents in general, and about their own accents? So each of the paradigms mentioned, World Englishes, English as an international language, English as a lingua franca, and translanguaging, each of the paradigms contributes toward a critique of native speaker bias. Also, these paradigms are partly dedicated to pedagogical interventions or toward reshaping English language instruction. So communicative style has been one of the more prominent pedagogies, but this Global Englishes framework is meant to problematize that style and to bring in more cross-cultural awareness. But one of the most common models for seeing interconnectedness in Global English is Catru's three-circle model, and that very simple model appears here on the left-hand side of the screen. So in this circle system, students can position themselves as legitimate speakers of English. And these kind of frameworks have led now to a new approach to English language teaching pedagogy, which is called Global Englishes language teaching. And that has a number of goals, which are presented on this slide. I'm just going to mention one of them, which is the last one, and that language learners' first language is in this framework no longer regarded as a problem or a barrier toward that person learning English, but it's seen as a resource. So a simple version of the research questions appears on this slide, and the research uses this Global Englishes or Global Englishes language teaching framework to ask whether a classroom intervention that offers Global Englishes instruction will have a significant effect on adult English language learners' self-perceptions of others and their own accents. And on the next slide, I will say more about what this intervention actually is. So the hypotheses are that a treatment group, the one that receives the intervention, will show more positive attitudes toward non-native English accents, as well as their own accents. And also that there will be a significant change over the course of one semester in the treatment group in its attitudes toward non-native accents. The site for the research is a university-level intensive English program. This is an experimental design. One class will be randomly assigned to receive the intervention. And what is the intervention? The listeners in that class will practice with both non-native and native speech samples. There will be explicit instruction in the Global English's communicative perspective, and the assessments of English speech in that class will not occur according to a native standards, but will be evaluated according to communicativeness and intelligibility. The control group in the experiment will receive the standard curriculum, which in my experience involves almost exclusively input from native speakers from the US and Canada. So how will the data be collected? Students will take, at the beginning and end of the semester, a 29-question survey, and the survey will include questions to put together a biographical profile, such as age, gender, how long students have studied English, and so on. And then there will be 3 scales, and these scales will measure first accent attitudes. So that is the preferences that students might have among standard English, their own accents, and for varieties such as Indian English, Japanese English, etc. The second scale is accent inclination, and this involves a series of statements to which students will react on a Likert scale. One of the statements is, I feel satisfied with my own English accents and would like to keep it. And students would react to that statement. And the third scale is accent acceptance, and this involves students listening to 8 alternative pronunciations in context, and they will rate the acceptance of the pronunciation of certain words in context. And that's why this illustration appears on the slides. The source of those speech samples will be the Speech Accent Archive at George Mason University. The data will be analyzed with paired sample t-tests. So drawing from the accent attitude and accent acceptance scales, these statistical analyses will judge if in the treatment group there is a significant difference in its regard for non-native and their own accents over the semester. And independent sample t-tests from another 2 of the survey scales will help answer if students from the 2 groups show a significant difference in their attitudes toward non-native and their own accents. And the limitations of the study is obviously in the small sample sizes. Each group will consist of 15 students. And there's also a lack of research in the classroom on using global Englishes, what some of the literature refers to as a theory-practice divide. So the effects of that on this research is that the survey's instruments have not really been evaluated. And the curricula that I'm looking at for phonology instruction in a global Englishes framework has not been refined to this point. So that concludes the presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.